So for our third speaker for this first round, Dr. Winston Yan, a genome engineer and physician scientist who co-founded Arbor Biotechnologies to advance next-generation CRISPR therapies and now leads ultra-rare disease efforts as founding president of N=1 Collaborative. Please welcome Winston Yan as he delivers his talk entitled Genetic Surgery for Genetic Agency, Building Procedural Model for Delivering Ultra-Rare Disease Therapies.
Great, thanks. So I am gonna propose a solution. It's one for, I don't claim to have all the answers and stuff, but I think it's one for discussion. And it was actually based on the feedback and discussion from Laura and Jim that I think, let's try to think about a path forward. So the hat that I'm wearing today is the N=1 Collaborative. This is, you can think of it as the ASGCT, but for individualized medicine developers. It was started about 4 or 5 years ago by some folks in this room, including Tim Yu. And we've been thinking a lot about how do you solve that exact problem of developing these ultra-rare therapies without, one, forcing companies to do what is naturally not within their business model. That doesn't work. And two, how to make safe and effective treatments on an individualized basis. And one of the things that we've come to is about alignment of incentives. So I'm going to start off and just pose a question. I think I'm going to assume the table stakes, this ground truth that we all care about expanding patient access and getting to that long tail of rare disease. So I'll ask you, if you had great, oops, too many. All right, so we develop therapeutic platforms. I'm a CRISPR genome engineer. Many of you are AAV gene therapists. Others have exciting new technologists. I'll pose the question, with your business hat on, as a therapeutics developer, would you learn more from 3,000 patients dosed with one drug or 300 different drugs on the same platform? They're slightly different, but having about 10 patients dosed with each drug. So how many is it? 3,000 patients with one platform therapeutic. And then, all right, great. We should talk about that, what you learn. How many people think you can learn more from 10 patients dosed across 300 different drugs? Okay, that's my instinct too. And I'll share with you that the top is Zolgensma, right? There's about 3,000 patients dosed worldwide. We've learned a lot, right? There's no question that we do have the experience developed. The bottom is what individual patient families, small companies, this whole sea of different therapeutic drug developers are moving forward in a semi-coordinated effort, but we can do better. And I think by doing better, we can learn a ton from it about platform therapeutics, whether it's more AAV capsids, more gene editing, antisense oligonucleotides. Our favorite genetic medicine platforms, we have the opportunity to do that if we can unlock the bottom. So I think there's 3 big challenges here. One is safety and efficacy, right? Going into the N=1 doesn't mean you should compromise any rigor in the drug development. So how do we actually do that in a way that's sustainable? One of them is a theme that's been touched upon, data sharing, figuring out ways of incentivizing companies and industry to participate while bringing that disease-specific knowledge of patient groups and academics to bring to bear on a very small patient population. The second, how do we get it paid for? That's the title of this talk, Genetic Surgery. Can we actually model it more like a surgical process and get, you can call it nickel and dime reimbursement, but it could be like millions of dollars instead of the $1 billion goalpost that everyone's trying to shoot for with commercial drugs. And the third thing is, how do we scale it? And this comes to the idea of accredited centers that actually Terry was talking about, and it's really good to see that there's alignment with the ASGCT. Okay, so I'll move quickly because I think some of these are already familiar with you. Why do we need to share data and a few drug development? This could be obvious, but I'll say first, it's safety. Jim said that events that happen in a small patient community ripple throughout the ecosystem, and I think that's not just for impressions of what happened, but we should actually take that real-time, the near real-time data opportunity and improve our trials that are in progress or inform new trials, right? It's for the better of patients everywhere. The second is it's just expensive to reinvent the wheel. Why do you have to relearn the same lessons on a given capsid, dosing regime, et cetera? Yeah, That's wasteful to hard-earned investor dollars or grant dollars. I think the last thing is just we need to honor the patients who are participating in these trials. Ultimately, they're signing up for, this is experimental treatments. This is not standard of care. And I think to honor them, we need to make sure we're learning all that we can, and sharing data is that important piece. So let's consider a model where there could be this development flywheel with ultra-rare treatments. You start off with platforms that are maybe first honed in biotech and pharma. This includes many of the technologies we work with. That state-of-the-art CMC, toxicology, just the experience of dosing it, can be shared with academic medical centers and N-of-1 drug developers. Those are the non-commercial space that we talked about earlier. Is there a loop back of that flywheel that actually helps these N-of-fews inform you as industry to make N-of-many more safe and more efficacious? I think yes. If you look at the story of Tim's story with developing Milasen, that was based on the chemistry that was from Spinraza, right, nusinersen. And so on and so forth. There's actually new learnings that happen with successive N-of-1s that have gone back into the development of commercially viable drugs that make them safer and more efficacious. So I think this is a flywheel that it's important for industry to organically participate in and not just say we're doing it out of our own goodwill. I think the reason for that is actually because there's ultimately, when you have commercial drugs that are informed by these N-of-1s, you will get better products if you choose to share knowledge and experience and engage. If you don't, there's a possibility that you'll get left behind or left groping for your events. You're trying to just then hope that you are just better than the collective wisdom of the field. How do we get these paid for? Well, we talked about this model of genetic surgery, right? And this is a plot that we all know too well. I led translational strategy at Arbor, and it was so frustrating just to have targets that worked really well, but ultimately say, oh, those are too few patients, or we can't really address them because this is just what the investors would want. There's that long tail of ultra-rare diseases that we're all trying to get to. I agree with the previous presenters that we need to think about a different business model. What if we thought about these more like treatments of surgery rather than like de novo drug development? And I think you have precedents that are starting to showcase that this speed is really now more amenable on the same timescale, and with a process that is repeatable, starting to become more and more like surgeries rather than like de novo drug development. So Tim helped develop a drug. I mean, we know baby KJ, but before baby KJ, there was Mila. And Mila was the first N-of-1 antisense oligo, a first de novo drug developed for a single patient. And that happened in 10 months, and baby KJ's case happened in 7 months. So imagine a world in which a child is born, say, down the road at Boston Children's Hospital. They have a cardiac defect. Today, they get evaluated by a specialized physician, a cardiologist, a pediatric surgeon. They identify the defect. They look at the patient's very own anatomy, their medical history, their wants and desires of their caretakers, and design a treatment course that's ultimately standardized but tailored to the same patient. That is an incredibly complex procedure, but it's the standard of care. You procure an organ. There's a surgeon who essentially delivers that care, right? Now imagine the situation where someone had a gene defect instead of an anatomical heart defect. That doesn't exist. We have a situation where the family is often led looking for that solution and on a wild goose chase. But I'd ask you to imagine a world when you have the same interventional geneticist or genetic surgeon who approaches the family. They determine of many different tools, whether it's AAV vectors to ASOs to editors, what is the right approach. They actually work with industry to create a well-defined CMC complete package that creates a safe and efficacious treatment for patients, and then they deliver that treatment. This is a world where we can make a scalable system to do this, and I would actually argue that a business model already exists of paying for surgical treatments. They're not billion-dollar molecules that you look for, is that you deliver the treatment and you actually have the ability to get reimbursed on that treatment itself. So the last thing I'm just going to touch on is this idea of how do we actually scale this? And this gets to Terry Flott's point of accredited centers. Maybe the way to do this best at first is to actually have centers that have the greatest experience of working with a particular modality, and they become accredited by the FDA to become a center of excellence of doing this. So this is a slide that Tim, David, and I proposed to HHS about accredited Center for Genetic Surgeries, where you have the input of a patient with a diagnosis, you have an FDA that says, here are a set of treatments and platforms that you can just get free running room to do without having to come to us every time for an IND. And you need industry partners who are providing rights of reference to given data sets. At these centers, you have to hold that accreditation, which means sharing your data, making sure your work is up to snuff. Then you deliver the treatment. That's everything from the preclinical work to coordinating the CMC to even doing the regulatory submissions and data approvals. You deliver that clinical care. You have continuous oversight, just like you do in a regular hospital setting. And then you importantly coordinate the benefit risk and also the justification for reimbursement. On the other end, patients receive treatments. You have this continuous learning because the data are shared openly, not only with regulators, but with the companies that have supplied the platform technologies. And then you track the real-world efficacy and safety. There's an incredible reverse translation opportunity as well to learn better about platforms and disease processes. So that's it. I'm going to leave the last slide up, the clicky bit. Oh yeah, by the way, it actually is already happening. This is moving. This is with the Rare Therapies Launchpad in the UK, as well as FDA has hinted at some interesting new approval pathways coming soon. And I'm just going to say that we have a true charge to collaborate here. This is not something that's the work of individuals alone. And I think only in getting together and uniting, sharing data, and building the systems together, we can make that broaden the patient impact that we want. So there you go.